I graduated college and I couldn't get a job anywhere. I had all these things I want to do. I want to start a business. I want to travel. I want to do all these different things, but they all felt impossible. And so I felt really bad for myself for a long time. And I had a whole bunch of things on this list that they all felt impossible. But one of them was run a triathlon. And I had reasons why I couldn't do all these other things. Nobody was hiring. I had no money. But it's like, I can get up and I could run around my block and start training for this triathlon and get on a bike and start training for this thing. So long story short, I sign up a month and a half or 2 months later, I go do it. And I have this realization after I finish it. I'm like, you spent so much time telling yourself that this was impossible. How many other things could you go do if you just went out and trained for it?
What did Impossible Foods come into the picture of your story with running your business?
We're supposed to negotiate in good faith. And they filed to add me personally to the case. So they're suing me personally. They're claiming trademark rights across all edible goods and services. So we have trademarks in supplements and health and fitness stuff. And they're saying that the trademark that they have that's related to plant-based meat is applicable to all categories of edible goods, which is not how trademarks work. The trial's in November. It's pretty much, they're going to have a bunch of claims. We're going to have a bunch of claims, and we're just having it out. That's the battle at hand. I can't really run a company called Impossible and then just give up when it got hard, right?
Joel, welcome to the podcast, brother.
Podcast. Hey, let's do it.
Dude, pumped to have you on. We've, I think we met poolside here in Austin a while back.
Yeah.
I think we met Delaney was cooking some burgers or something like that.
Yeah.
And because I had your name in my phone. You shared your number with me in the Twitter DMs, but was just pumped to connect. I've heard your story before around Impossible, your brand.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm excited to hear a little bit more about just the whole backstory of what's happened with Impossible Foods and your brand Impossible. But pumped to have you on, bro.
Dude, thanks for having me. I feel like at this point, most of my real life connections are initially Twitter connections. And then it's we bump into each other somewhere around Austin, and then everything becomes full circle.
Well, dude, especially Austin. I feel like there's so many. You mentioned Nat. And I'm dude, there's just so many of us here in Austin where it's just saw you on my Twitter feed, spouting off about Oatly.
Yeah.
And it's just cool.
It's he recorded right over there.
Yeah.
They recorded over there. And,
yeah.
Which podcast studio are you at?
When did you get down to Austin?
Dude, I got down to Austin end of 20. Is this close enough to my face?
Oh, yeah, you're good.
2018, 2019, somewhere there.
Okay.
I was doing a nomadic thing for a while, for a couple of years, and then kind of wanted to sit down in one spot and really focus on growing the business. And I was I'm going to be in Austin halftime and then keep traveling halftime. And then that was right before COVID happened.
That's everyone's dream.
Yeah. And then it was right before COVID. And when COVID hit, I was oh, I'm just here all the time now. So it's been a few years, but Austin's great except for 3 months in the summer where it gets 110.
Yeah, it's just boiling hot.
Yeah.
So is that right around the time that you started Impossible?
2018,
no, 2019?
So Impossible, I started Impossible in 2010.
Dang.
Okay. So it started off as I graduated college and I couldn't get a job anywhere. And I spent a lot of time feeling bad for myself. And blogs were really big back then. If people were reading blogs. But I basically, I graduated as the middle of the great, the big recession, and nobody was hiring.
Yeah, it's terrible time to graduate.
Yeah, terrible time. So nobody was getting jobs. People who had gotten offers had gotten deferrals. And I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, but I started applying at all the business jobs I thought I should get. Nobody was hiring. Started applying at Target. Target wouldn't hire me. I applied at Starbucks at one point. Starbucks wouldn't respond back. And so I was feeling bad about myself in my parents' basement. I got good grades. I did sports, learned another language, did all those things you're supposed to do in college, and had nothing to show for it after getting out. And I kind of just felt bad for myself for a long time. And then I did a short Christmas stint at UPS in the winter. And
just up at 3 a.m.
Yeah, you're
boxes.
Slinging packages in Chicago, getting chased by dogs, slipping on ice, whatever. And they lay you off after Christmas because it's a real seasonal contract. And I'm in a pretty bad place mentally. And I'm just sitting in the basement. I went through all 12 movies that were on Netflix at the time. It was on a big library. And I had all these things I want to do. I want to start a business. I want to travel. I want to do all these different things, but they all felt impossible. And so I felt really bad for myself for a long time. And then after I ran out of movies to watch on Netflix, I I just kind of came back to my list, and I had a whole bunch of things on this list that they all felt impossible. But one of them was run a triathlon, and I had reasons why I couldn't do all these other things. Nobody was hiring. I had no money, but it's like I can get up and I could run around my block and start training for this triathlon and get on a bike and start training for this thing. So, long story short, I signed up for like an indoor triathlon at Lifetime Fitness. I sign up a month and a half or 2 months later, I go do it. And I have this realization after I finish it. I'm like, you spent so much time telling yourself that this was impossible. How many other things could you go do if you just went out and like trained for it? So that kind of started this blog where I basically had a list of impossible things I wanted to do. And then I just started going out documenting them. And so started off with triathlons, went up to like a half Ironman, kind of tricked myself into becoming a runner at that point. You know, you're doing a half Ironman, you do a half marathon at the end of all the running, and you're like, oh, I guess I'm a runner now.
Yeah, I'm a full-time runner.
Yeah. And so then I got into running, got into marathons, then got into ultra marathons, and that's kind of where I, you know, started banging out a whole bunch of different marathons. I did an ultra marathon. I did one ultra marathon to raise money for a school in Guatemala. And then after that, we were like, that was really awesome, super impactful. Let's do it again. And I did a bigger project where I ran an ultra marathon on every continent.
Wow.
And it was 7 ultra marathons, 7 continents, and we built 7 schools.
Dang.
So we raised a bunch of money for that. And so that's kind of like the impetus of Impossible, where it started off as this like a personal way for me to like challenge myself. But then over time, instead of just talking about me all the time, you know, we built like information products, apps, tools, like supplements to help other people push their limits and do something impossible. So
Dude,
that's kind of the evolution of how it's gone over the years.
And so is this all contained through a blog? Were you just distributing kind of these things that you were doing through a blog, or was there YouTube channel associated with it?
Yeah, so we did, I mean, it started off just as the blog, and, you know, I would do videos, updates for a while, but it wasn't like it's funny, I was going back through, you know, we'll talk about the lawsuit or whatever, but I was going back through in Discovery, like part of the process, you go back through 15 years of all the documents.
You're just reliving every moment of your, your rise up.
And early on, like, I don't know when you got like into the online space, but like, I would say from like 2008 to 2016, like blogs were like way more over indexed than I think other media was.
Big time.
And so it was very blog driven. Like some people were starting to mess around with video, but like upload speed, you know, like all that stuff. So
yeah.
we definitely had video content, and there was a lot of stuff there, but most of the challenges were driven by the blog and then the email list off of that. And then over time, we've done a lot of different mini documentaries about, you know, it covered my you know, my challenges and my stories, but then we also featured, you know, other people pushing their limits and other ultra marathoners or athletes out there kind of on the edge. So kind of the goal is like a Red Bull media house.
I love it. Yeah, it's giving me like a is it Yes Theory?
Yeah, those guys are pretty cool. Yeah.
So like what type of people were you attracting to this? Was it just endurance athletes, or like all sorts of people who are just trying to push the envelope, whether it's like business or fitness?
Yeah, I think it's more of a mentality type person than a specific demographic, because we'll have a lot of people that are, I would say, you know, probably like heavily male, like 60-40 or 70-30 male. And I would say the skew, you know, it's like 20 to 40, you know, somewhere in there. But we get people from all over the spectrum. Like we had this, I saw a video of the list that I created. I called my impossible list. And then we created options for people to make their own versions of it, and tens of thousands of them have been made. And I got a notification when I was going through Discovery before of like this old lady. She's like 65, and she's like, she's got a nice, cute British accent. And she's like, I'm going to start my own impossible list, and this is how I'm going to go do it. And it's like she's doing I think it's a walking challenge for charity or whatever. But yeah, like, I mean, a lot of our athletes, I think it's kind of differentiated between two types of people. There's like some of the like elite performers that are kind of already there. They're kind of like on the edge of their craft. And then there's the people that are kind of aspirational and they're like, I want to do that. And they're looking at like, hey, where am I in my life right now? And how can I kind of elevate to that next thing?
That's awesome.
So,
dude, I love that message. And I feel like at that time, the internet was still early in terms of just like people being like smartphone probably had just come out like what, like 3-4 years
yeah.
prior
People
to that.
still
like,
weren't, I didn't think it even used a smartphone for the first 4 years of the site or something.
So like
that.
this is like kind of like peak blogs.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like what, you know, there used to be a lot of friction in terms of like getting on the internet.
Yeah.
Like, you know, everyone kind of has an Instagram now. Everyone kind of has, you know, their stuff, Twitter or whatever it is. But there was a lot of, I felt a lot of friction when I first started writing online, at least, you know, X, you know, 2020, you know, it's like, all right, I got to, you know, start putting myself out there.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, like what that was like for you, just breaking that chasm.
Well, I mean, in some ways, it's a lot easier now if you're just doing like X or you're doing Instagram because
totally.
you just spin up the account and you're good to go.
Totally.
I still push people to make their own website and control their own online presence because you can lose an account, you get hacked, you get banned, whatever, you know. I think that's getting a little bit better. But when I got first started, I basically had to like teach myself low level like internet skills. Like I didn't know how to make a website. I couldn't afford to have someone do it. So I think I just had a Bluehost account and I messed around probably like a half dozen to a dozen times, like installing WordPress on a site, accidentally overwriting my site, like having to nuke everything, start all over, so many times. And right now, I think if you sign up for most hosting plans, you just say install WordPress and you're good to go.
Yeah.
Or use like Squarespace or something like that. Back then, it was like you bought a hosting box, and then you had to understand cPanel, and you're like, it was like this whole thing. And so, luckily, I didn't have a job, so I had some free time. So I was just like, you know, one window open with like how to do this, and then the other window of like me trying to not screw things up. But I mean, you do it a bunch of times, and then I realized like I kind of figured it out, and so I started helping some other people do some WordPress sites. But the cool thing about it to me is like once you realize, you know, the memes going around of like you can just do things.
Yeah.
Like once you realize like, yeah, you don't know how to do it, but you could pretty easily figure it out and just become like a high agency person. That's just like, I could just sit around and wait for the right person to come into my life to show me how to do it or do it for me. Or I could just, you know, take a deep breath, suck it up and just go figure it out. You're like, oh, I could figure out a lot of things in, you know, like a really frustrating long weekend.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's just,
with a lot of coffee.
Yeah. Just like, listen, I'm just going to caffeine my way through this. So,
so what were some of this is your first entrepreneurial endeavor is Impossible? Like,
yeah, I mean, it was
pretty
kind
crazy that you had success with it through, I'm sure it was a longer time period, but
yeah. Well, it's interesting because it's one, I don't know if it was like, I did like a wedding videography thing right out of school. That was a terrible idea. Don't do that. Anyone do not. It's terrible. It's like, especially because I wasn't even charging that much, but it's like it's the most important day of their entire life. And to you, you're like, I've seen 6 of these the last 6 weeks. I can't, it's not a good fit for me personally.
Yeah. You have to really love.
Yeah. It's hard to come up with a new creative way. I mean, people do it, but that wasn't my thing. So I had messed around with a bunch of stuff. In high school, I had a lawn mowing business. So I kind of got exposed to entrepreneurship, and everybody else was doing like, they were working at like the swimming pool or I think there was like some painting people or like fast food. And I was like, I'm just going to go make a bunch of money on a Saturday. And it like ruined my Saturday, but like paid for pretty much everything. And so that was my first exposure. And then with Impossible started off, you know, for me, I was in a spot in my headspace where I was like, I just need to go do something with my life. Like it needs to be a vehicle to do something interesting. And then once, you know, it kind of built an audience, that's when I started kind of experimenting with like products and different things and launched a lot of different products. And some have done really, really well. And some of them have not done very well, you know? So that was kind of fun. But the goal, I think the lesson out of that was just, if you just kind of keep going, you figure things out over time. And people get real tied to this. Like, I have to make this one post. I signed up for X. I want to make this one post on X, and it's going to be either viral or I have to quit, right?
Bust. Yeah.
And I think the real value is just the continual creation and moving forward, and just, I think that's the lesson that I've had the last 15 years of just like ultra marathons and everything. It's like, there's so many times you're like, I should quit, I should go home, whatever. And if you just keep moving and you just don't stop, eventually those emotions go away, something else opens up, and you find a new path forward. So
yeah, there's something beautiful about the parallel between endurance sports and business. Like, I do feel like there's just so much overlap just in terms of the mindset that it takes to do both. Like, you're just basically progressive overload training in the business world.
Yeah.
Like, you might only be able to run 1 mile the first time you go out and run, but in 3 months, if you give yourself 3 months, you'll probably be able to run 10.
Yeah.
Like, if you really put yourself to it.
Yeah.
And then like from there, sky's the limit. Like, in business, the same way.
I've been telling people that lawsuits are just ultra marathons for entrepreneurs. It's like, listen, you just gotta like find your pace, settle in, and just stick it out.
Dude, I feel like that's one of those things that, if you're just starting to like scratch the itch of like wanting to be an entrepreneur and get in the game, one of those things that can keep you on the sidelines. Like, like there's all these bad things that can happen to you.
Yeah.
Lawsuit being one of them. It's like, that fear of, something bad happening to you as a business person, like going bankrupt, lawsuit. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, those things it's kind of like the price of doing business in some sense. Like, those things are just going to happen if you're in the game long enough.
Yeah, I think the first time I got sued, someone's like, well, you're not like a real business. Like, it's like you're not a real business until you've been sued. And I was like, oh, I don't know if that's a good welcome to the party type slogan, but it's one of those things. I've said this. I don't even know if it's a good saying, but it's, at least life isn't boring.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you think like something bad happened to you is like the worst thing, but it's like, I don't know. When I was in my parents' basement, I couldn't do anything. Like, it was a weird like paralytic feeling where it's like I can't even, I would almost. When I gave myself permission to like have bad things happen or do something wrong, just it let me move, and it gave me the freedom of movement. And so I think a lot of people get stuck in this idea that everything's gonna be perfect or nothing's gonna go wrong. Like, stuff's gonna go wrong. So it's like, if you're moving forward, you can have a little direction over it versus if you're just, letting everything happen to you. I think that's a way worse position to be in.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I'd much rather play offense than defense.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, dude, so like, when did Impossible, it's a perfect segue. When did Impossible Foods come into the picture of your story with running your business? You said 4 years ago?
Yeah. So, let's say, I'm going to mess up the dates off the top of my head, but I think it's been going about 4 years. So, what had basically happened was, again, I don't know if I'm going to have the dates perfect, but they were called this other company for a long time. They're called like Moroxy Foods. And at some point, they rebranded. They paid this big company to rebrand to a new name, and they picked Impossible Foods. And they were like a niche. They were like a niche restaurants or something like that for a while. And sometime 2019, 2020, they get like FDA clearance to start selling direct to consumer. There's like there's a molecule or something like that they had patented, and they hadn't had it cleared, and it got cleared or whatever. And right around 2020 is when I think they started raising a ton of money, not just like a few million here. Like, I think they've raised like $2 billion.
Yeah.
And they started like, I would say, it seems like they started moving into a lot of different areas that we'd been like existing in. So we, again, off the top of my head, they started doing like recipes, and like some of the earliest stuff we had ever done were like fitness training pieces with, meal plans and recipes. Also, if you look at our logos at that time, so we use both versions of this logo. It's Impossible with a line through it. There's an animated version of it as well. The idea is like,
you're crossing that off the list.
Yeah.
Basically.
So it's there's a quote I always say. It's always impossible until it's done.
Yeah.
And so you write your impossible things on your list, and when it's done, you cross it off. And so that's the idea behind that. So, they had like I think they had a similar logo, but they were like in a niche restaurant business, and then they started aggressively, I think they like sponsored some marathons, and they're going after like race athletes, and they're doing, and we're like, so we sent them a note. We're like, hey guys, it seems like there's some confusion happening. Can we talk about this? Let's have a conversation. And they're like, no, we want to, well, that actually, scratch that. They just didn't respond. They just didn't respond. And so they were finding like these trademarks in these categories that we were like, I think that's the line where you're starting to move into our territory. And so if you have a trademark, you're legally required to oppose trademarks you think might infringe. Otherwise, you lose those trademark rights. So I think we filed an extension to oppose while we sent them a note. They ignored, I believe, all of those things. And then when we filed the opposition, they had to kind of engage with us. And so they continued to kind of ignore it. So I think they asked for an extension or two as like a professional courtesy. And we were like, sure, it's fine. And you kind of go back and forth, like, hey, what do you guys want? We're not getting a lot out of them. They basically do this up to the deadline of like when they're forced to respond. And instead of responding, the night before this like deadline hits, they file a lawsuit against us. And they filed a lawsuit to like kind of kick this whole trademark thing out the window. Like
thinking that you would just kind of like be like, whoa.
Yeah,
I don't want any part of this.
It's kind of like if you're like walking on the street and you brush shoulders with somebody, and then the guy just turns around and takes out a gun and like starts shooting, and you're like, okay, it's kind of escalation, buddy.
Because it seems like up until this point, you had kind of handled this as like, hey, we could come to a mutual understanding around like where you guys operate, where I operate, and this is my trademark.
I think that's probably a fair assessment. It's mostly like I think we had gotten some notes of people like, hey, are you doing this fake meat thing? And we're like, no, we actually don't do that at all. And so it's like, our goal the whole time was just like, let's not be.
We just don't want it.
Let's just be not associate. Let's not be confusing.
Yeah.
Like you probably don't want confused customers. We don't want confused customers. And so, that's when they did that. And the case, it was a trademark filing in DC, and this can get a little boring. So if we need to edit this for simplicity, their lawyers were like in Washington, I want to say, state. I might mess this up. The note we had sent was to their lawyers, wherever their lawyer office was, and the trademark office is in DC. So that's where we had directed that stuff, and they filed to sue me in California, which I wasn't. I'm in Texas.
You're in Austin at this point.
Yeah, and so the case actually got thrown out because it didn't seem like they had jurisdiction to sue us in Texas, and so that happened initially. They tried to appeal it. Like it got thrown out, and they could have just like walked away, and they were like, actually, that was kind of aggressive. Let's just figure this out. And instead of doing that, they doubled down and they filed to appeal it and reinstate the lawsuit. Went through appeals. The court granted it. They refile appeals later on, and it was like 3 years. It took us 3 years to get to that point. So this is like early last year. They refiled this case against us. They've gone through like 2 or 3 different law firms at this point, like dozens of lawyers. A whole new CEO and C-suite had kind of cycled through. So it's like everybody at the company is continually signing off on this thing. And so they filed their claims against us. And then it was 3 years before we could like basically enter any counterclaims and countersue. So that was the number one question everybody asked me is like, can you sue them? And you're like, yeah, but the way the courts work, you have to like wait procedurally in order to enter those. And so we actually filed counterclaims against them. And 2 weeks later, after we filed the counterclaims, is when they, I don't know if you've seen this, but they launched a new rebrand.
I didn't see it.
So they launched a rebrand last year that was like red, and they changed the logo styling.
And
they're like, we're trying to be a meteor brand. We want to, appeal to more meat eaters. No mention that they've been suing this other company for 3.5 years. So, I'm almost done. I'm almost done.
They're trying to be a meat eater brand. Is that what you just said? Or
great question. I have no idea.
You said media brand.
No, meat eater.
Meat eater.
Yes.
Well, I saw them at Expo West, and I walked up to their booth, and I'm like looking at this beautiful exhibit, and I see like a deli meat section. I'm like, this is cool. What beef company is this?
Yeah.
And I'm looking around, and it like they are fully just trying to like just mimic. I mean, obviously it's a fake meat company.
Yeah.
But like the way that they're marketing just seems so disingenuous to me, where it's like they're just like it's almost it feels deceptive.
Well, I can't talk too much about that of them, but the thing that I've noticed is that they started off and they wanted to be they're a climate change company. So they wanted to replace animals in the ecosystem, is what the founder said. They want to get rid of cows. They think it's the biggest lever that you could do to fix the environment. But I think they spent a lot of money on R&D, and I think the CEO is on record saying like people don't, nobody eats food because of the climate impact.
Yeah.
Like it's a nice story to sell investors, but nobody like if you have like 2 burgers and one is like delicious and the other one is helping the climate, you're eating the one that tastes good.
Yeah.
And so they were just in the Wall Street Journal recently, and they're trying to talk about, they started off as this like green climate brand, and now they're going after meat eaters. And I think it's public record that they, reportedly spent like $20 million last summer doing this big push towards meat eaters. And the CEO is, I think it's a quote, he says, nobody bought the stuff. And so they've tried the climate thing, they've tried the meat eaters, and so now they're in the Wall Street Journal talking about going after flexitarians. And those are people who like purportedly will eat normal meat and also plant-based meat. But I don't, that to me, that seems like an MBA exercise. Yeah. It doesn't seem like it's a real cohort of people.
Well, yeah, like that cohort doesn't seem like they're like super passionate about anything. They're just like kind of like the overlap of a Venn diagram.
Yeah, it seems like it would be like I'm a busy person who needs food and it seems healthy.
Yeah.
That I haven't done a ton of research.
Yeah.
Or it's like, it's a vegan person who misses their old meat.
Yeah, they're like going to snack on some meat because they miss it.
But it's not they raised they raised $2 billion at a $7 billion valuation. It doesn't seem like the revenues of that entire, if you look at Beyond Meat's revenue, it's public. It's not doing great. So
I mean, every time I walk through Whole Foods, I'm like, no one's buying this stuff.
Yeah,
there's no.
Well, Whole Foods, I don't even think carries
here.
all their line. They carry because, I can't speak to too much of it, but I think Whole Foods has ingredients requirements on a whole bunch of the foods that they carry. But yeah, it's in the pandemic, there are a bunch of memes of like all the meat aisles are completely empty, and then the plant-based meat section's full, and you're like, it's not great.
Dude.
But so that's kind of the rundown of the lawsuit. But it's finally coming up. Like the trial is set in November, so.
And that's you countersuing them.
That's the whole. That's all the claims.
This is everything.
Yeah. So they've got a bunch of claims in the case against me. Oh no. So the one benefit is there was a court-ordered mediation date in June. That's where you're supposed to like take the heat off both sides. Everybody comes to the middle. What do you want? What do we want? And I can't talk about what happened in mediation. It's like the one rule of mediation. It's still going on, so you can kind of guess how it went. But yeah. I mean, it's all public. So, but the night before mediation, so they had this one claim where they basically want to throw out this opposition that we had. The night before mediation, they file a whole bunch of different claims in the case. I'm not going to get them all right off the top of my head, but they literally, like, I go out to San Jose, I'm in my hotel, and I'll like get a notification that they're filing more stuff against me. The day before, we're supposed to like negotiate in good faith, and they like filed to add me personally to the case. So they're suing me personally, and then they're claiming trademark rights across all edible goods and services. So we have trademarks in like supplements and like health and fitness stuff. And they're saying that the trademark that they have that's related to plant-based meat is applicable to all categories of edible goods, which is like not how trademarks work. And on the USTPO registrar, that's like 4 to 5 or 6 categories. So if that's successful, then it's like that changes trademarks for tons and tons of brands.
Wow.
In the U.S. So they do that the night before. They do a lot of these things like the night before.
Yeah,
like it's real slick.
Using timing
they're like
to their advantage.
It's very cute. It's like, come on, guys. But the trial's in November. It's pretty much they're gonna have a bunch of claims. We're gonna have a bunch of claims. We're just having it out.
What so for you, I mean, it's interesting that they've gone through so many CEOs and they've kept at this case. So clearly there's some ground to be gained for them in this case, or like just a defensive measure. Like they've spent thousands of dollars defending this. And
I don't have access to their financials. I would expect with the level of law firms that they're dealing with, they're spending millions and millions of dollars on this.
So does it feel like a David versus Goliath for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, when they added me personally, I was like, okay, like, what do you want me to do? Okay, so I guess we're doing this then. So yeah, I would say it's very,
very much.
I don't know if they're doing, you draw trajectories however you want, but it doesn't seem like they're doing that great. I can't really speak to the decision making because they're not making decisions that make financial it doesn't seem like they're making decisions that make financial sense.
Yeah.
So it seems like they've done stuff like this before. They had a patent lawsuit with a company called Motif, and it was about some of these bioengineered molecules or whatever they're making, and they went back and forth, and they basically just like scorched earth. I think one of the reports I read was like scorched earth, put these guys in the ground, and then like bought the IP from them.
Yeah,
and
I remember that company, Motif. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a spin out of some other company, and like that was, it's kind of weird when you get lawyers involved with stuff because it often businesses don't win, lawyers win. And with this one, it's like it just doesn't really make that much sense because, I mean, they've been super aggressive from the get-go, and what's been funny about it is that sorry, it's not. I mean, it's kind of serious, but it is a little funny. It's like their biggest advocates, like Rich Roll, is like a big vegan podcaster. He's got one of the largest vegan podcasts out there, and I think he interviewed the founder at one point. But they covered the case like 3 years ago, and on the case, one of the guys was like, it comes across as like, their entire actions are like an elitist asshole move. And it's funny. It's like you're doing all these things. You're purporting to be good for the environment, good for people.
Yeah, right.
All these things. We're such a nice company. Yeah. And then you go do all these things that are like not nice people things. So I don't know. I think when you go through adversity and you go through conflicts, like they're very revealing about what you stand for. And one of the things for me, it's like, I shouldn't be that surprised.
Yeah.
Like I named my company Impossible.
Yeah.
That was dumb. Like you think it was going to be easy?
Yeah.
Like I can't like.
Here you go.
Yeah. It's like.
Tee that one up for yourself.
Yeah. So my joke is my next company is going to be called Very Easy, Lots of Money, Mostly Vacation. It's a very long name, but.
Well, maybe if the lawsuit goes well.
Yeah. But. I mean, it's really interesting because it is a chance to kind of implement a lot of the things that, when you're in an ultra marathon, you have to go through a whole bunch of stuff over and over and over again. I mean, I remember I did 100K in Antarctica, and I remember like 65K in, like my back is starting to lock up.
Was it like summer in Antarctica? Or
yeah, it's summer like, in Antarctica. It's still like negative. Yeah. You're like, this is balmy. It's a vacation here.
Yeah.
It was like light all night though, So they put you out there.
That's wild.
We were supposed to run in the morning, and we landed, and they're like, actually, landed at like 4 p.m. And they're like, you're going to start running at like, I think it was like 9 p.m. at night. And we're like, okay. You start running at 9, and you run for 12 hours straight. You know, it was more than that, I think. You run from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m., and the sky doesn't change.
Dude,
That's
so trippy.
That's super trippy. 10 hours into a run, you're just like
nothing has changed.
Yeah, you're
Did you feel
already
like-
you're already tripping a little bit. You're like, what's going on?
Dude, that's like landing on the moon or something like that. You know,
Yeah.
it's like you feel like you're in another world. I remember I went to Copenhagen, one of these cities up
Yeah.
north, and I'm just like, and it was during the summer.
Yeah.
It was like 11 o'clock at night, and the
Yeah.
sun is still up. I'm like in this hotel room, being like, am I dreaming? Like, where am I?
Can I get
This is
blackout
so
curtains?
crazy.
What's
Yeah,
happening?
This
Yeah,
is so crazy.
that's funny.
So for you, just like going through this whole case, is there things that you've learned just kind of about the resiliency of being in business? Because I mean, from my standpoint, you know, I've really only cut my teeth in the business world for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Like, you know, have aspirations of being, you know, doing this, you know, work for yourself thing for the rest of my life. But I imagine there's going to be seasons of like, you know, where you're literally have to just like put your foot in the ground and fight for every last inch of what you're building. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, like what you've learned through that whole process.
That's a good question. One is just like, if you give yourself off ramps, you'll find them. So a lot of people are like, oh, I'll do this, and if it doesn't work out, maybe I'll. And one of the things I learned from racing, again, a lot of these things are just things that I learned from racing that I remember at like mile 55, I did this, and then how does it apply here? But at every start line, I just, you know, I'm not the fastest runner. I'm not like winning a bunch of races. But I remember at each start line, I'd be like, I'm finishing this race. And unless I break a leg or like literally got to get carted off, like I'll walk it in if I have to. Like I'm going to finish it. So I think part of it's that. I think part of it's like success can be kind of like the biggest failure is just like quitting, right? So I know you guys are doing a couple different things. I don't know how all the businesses are going, but you know, the first info product I ever launched when I first started my blog was like a triathlon training product, and we sold some, but it wasn't like did not do the market research on how many people are interested in of my audience, how many people are interested in like learning about triathlons or whatever.
Yeah, right.
And so it's like, if I was like, oh, well, that means I can just never do entrepreneurship again, I should quit. Like that would have been a pretty short career, but the continual iteration of just being like, okay, well, what's next? What's next? What's next? And then the other piece is like expect it to be hard. Because if you expect it to happen, then when it actually is hard, you're like, I'm not surprised.
This is what I signed up for.
Yeah. Like the surprise is almost worse. If you
Yeah.
think it's going to be easy and then you get punched in the face, you're like, whoa, I didn't see this coming.
Right.
But if you're like, yeah, that's part of the deal, then when it happens, you're like, I get it. I used to tell myself stuff during races of like, listen, I'm finishing this race no matter what. Like, it can rain, it can hail, like, I could fall off my bike, I could do whatever. And then I remember this 100-mile bike race I did. I was saying that out loud, like miles 20, 30. Later on in the race, it started raining. It started hailing. We had like 25 mile per hour winds. There's like a tornado. Like I had to pull off at one point for like a tornado warning or watch, whatever it was. And I was just like, okay, so all the things that you said, you'd be willing to like, you know, go through for this, you kind of have to go through. So like, I think that's actually really helpful exercise is like, sit down and write, you know, everybody writes what they want out of, you know, their new goal or challenge, but it's like, write down what you're willing to give up.
Dude.
And what you're willing to like suffer through, because you're going to have to probably go through something. And if you write it down, then instead of it being a surprise and you have spending all these mental cycles being like, woe is me, why does this happen to me? It's almost like a checklist. You're like, oh, yep, okay, so we're there. We're there.
Right where I expected to be.
Yeah, okay, we're right on track. This is good.
Dude, it's funny because I moved down from to Austin from Boston and was kind of just like down here on a mission, just trying to, you know, launch launch a business in the health and wellness space. And I wrote just a 1-page letter to myself about all the different changes and things that I was expecting to face in that year or 2 years, 3 years. And dude, I found this little yellow, those yellow
Notepads.
notepads. I find this yellow notepad, and I'm flipping through it, and I see that, and it was like a year and a half later, and I'm like, literally all these things happened. And
That's crazy.
it was great. It was great because it just reminded me, I'm like, okay, so you knew at the starting line that you were willing to go through all this to get to this point where, you're not sure where this is all going, but like at the end of the day, you were willing to give up this to like go through this experience, learn what you were going to learn, and, put yourself in a position to make some money, make an impact, do things that are important in the world. So I think it was like a great exercise for me, knowing like, all right, like these are the trade-offs, and just be real with yourself.
Yeah. I think it's really fun to write stuff down and forget about it and just do what you did, where you're like, I completely forgot about it. You put it in your subconscious, and then your brain kind of starts figuring out solutions for it, even if you're not thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that's a little more woo-woo than I typically get, but like it's happened enough times where you're just like, write down the thing, write down like what you're willing to give up, and then get to work,
Yeah. So how has all this affected your business? Like, are you guys still operating the same way, or has it slowed you down in terms of what you're producing and putting out?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have to allocate a ton of stuff towards legal expenses, which is annoying.
Yeah.
You don't get into business just to be like, we'll fight legal battles,
Yeah.
but it's like, you have a $1 billion company coming after you, and they're like suing you personally. You're like, all right, let's, that's the battle at hand. So
Yeah.
the business is good. The brand is good. People still like, I think if anything, people resonate more than ever. And it's one of those ones you're like, I can't really run a company called Impossible and then just give up when it got hard, right? So, right. Yeah. Really unfortunate. Yeah. I mean, that would be a really, poorly named company. So I think what's been fun has been being able to talk about it a little bit more recently. And I think people also resonate with that just because, I think there's a couple things. One, when I first started out, I was sharing all the stuff that I was going through all the time. And as you there's a weird thing that happens as you get some sort of success. You kind of, for me, I think even sometimes you may want to pull back sharing stuff because you're like, oh, now I have something to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you don't have anything to lose, you're like, oh, I'll just tell it whatever. And what's been fun about this is I get back to the sharing of like, here's how I'm thinking about the case. Here's my mentality. Here's how I'm kind of going about it. And in some ways, it's really similar to how I started off in my parents' basement. And there's been, in some ways, people are paying attention because of the lawsuit, or, plant-based meat, you can, whether you eat it or not, I don't really care. It did seem like it had like a moment for a second a couple years ago. And it does seem like that momentum is washing away. And if anything, it's going in the opposite direction. And so
that was like the kindest way you could have said that.
I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to be nice.
It's a dumpster fire.
There's words on my
Yeah. For legal clarity, that was me.
I just think the zeitgeist is like it's very clearly moving towards like real whole foods. I think a lot of vegans and vegetarians even feel like that.
They're like, why was I so charged up about this? Where it's like there's so much nuance in the space. So it's like, I think not all cows are bad. It's the way.
I think a lot of people, I think a lot of investors got caught up in the hype.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think there was a lot of money in it. And then people were like, they like to try new stuff, right? Like trying new stuff is pretty cool. But then trying it a second time is maybe less exciting. Like it doesn't have the excitement value. And then you're like, what am I actually optimizing for? What am I actually wanting to get out of this? And so I think there's just a lot of clarity around like, even if you're not factory farming, there's other ways to get, it's in Austin, it feels like it's everywhere where people are just like, I'm gonna get a half cow here. I'm gonna do, I know my farms.
I know
whatever.
the person who raises cattle.
Yeah. So I think there's just a lot more options, and maybe that's, post COVID, it's opening up, and then people are just kind of, I think people want to know where their stuff comes from, and in some ways the plant-based meat space is kind of going to the ultra processed food route, or it's like a factory. It's not factory farming, but it's like factory food, right? Yeah. And if again, I'm pretty like hands off on this stuff. Like if people want to have whatever they want, I don't really care.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like it's gonna replace animals in the ecosystem, like from my read of things as they stand right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I feel like COVID really shifted the zeitgeist towards like getting closer to your food and understanding where it came from.
yeah.
So a lot of these people who were sitting there and being like, oh, I'm just gonna, like, I think a vegan diet's like, yeah, if you're like sourcing from, a person who has like a community garden up the street, like that's incredible.
Yeah.
But then, you can kind of trick yourself into thinking like this fake meat company that's, I don't even know what's in there. It's like canola oil and some other like random things where it's like,
we could pull it up.
Try right here.
Yeah. Try to do a pronunciation test. But, it's vegans are, I don't, the vegan diet is kind of an interesting diet because it's not necessarily based on nutrient density. It's based on what you're not doing, right? It's based on like a real vegan diet is like you're avoiding cruelty to animals.
Yeah.
However that's defined, right?
Yeah.
So like you could have like a vegan diet of like Lay's potato chips.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's not necessarily healthy.
You can be abusing yourself in the process of doing a vegan diet.
But a vegan would stand behind that. So
yeah.
There's a weird angle here where it's like, I guess this is my just not understanding the space or the marketing angle. It's like you're selling meat, you're trying to sell, you don't like meat, so you're trying to replace meat with something that's similar to meat to people who don't like meat, but want to eat something that's, it just doesn't.
Yeah, those multiple billions of dollars would be so much better spent just like starting 100,000 gardens all across the U.S.
I mean, that'd be
great.
Yeah, it'd be super interesting. But the ROI, you can't sell we're going to monopolize the food supply and then sell that. Bill Gates isn't interested in.
It's really funny the VC model for these food companies. Like, I don't know. Like to me, the idea of like just raising a bunch of money to go after creating this future of food. Like I remember South by Southwest was in Austin. I mean, it's in Austin every year, but I was paying attention to it 2 years ago, and there was this future of food panel that all of it was just like fake food companies. They weren't farms.
Yeah.
They were just, hey, lab grown meat or these things.
They had milks, they had cheeses, they did ice creams, they did all sorts of stuff. Yeah,
totally. And I'm like, wait, where are the actual like farmers? Like, are we just cutting these guys out as the future of food?
Yeah.
No one wants to think about like regenerative farming.
Yeah.
Or as a possibility here.
Well, it's just interesting to me that like they take VC models. I think the actual problem is that you take a VC model and it doesn't map to the CPG space at all. Like
totally,
because it's not even just the plant-based space, but it's like all these other companies. I'm gonna get myself in trouble here, but it's like Allbirds. It was like a shoe company. They raised all this money, and then the VCs are expecting like software style valuations and exits, and CPG doesn't really do that. And so if you do something in the CPG space, a lot of people are raising much smaller rounds, maintaining a lot more control and nailing the product.
Yeah.
And when they do that, they're able to scale. Like what you end up needing a lot more is like working capital and scaling capital, but you don't need like billions of dollars to scale some of these brands.
Totally.
Is that Chris's brand? So it's like Chris. I'm pretty sure he's.
Yeah, we'll give a little shout out to Chris here.
Yeah, Chris. Shout out Chris. Like they're self-funding that, right? Element raised just like a small amount of money, and they're scaling. And they're huge.
Totally.
And I think that's kind of the model going forward for CPG, where you raise enough to give you the traction that you need to scale up, but then you stay disciplined.
Yeah.
And you don't just get like, hey, we're going to raise all this money. Because if you get these crazy valuations, then you're kind of stuck. And you're in these spots where it's like, I don't know Impossible Foods numbers, but Beyond Meat, I think at IPO, they popped to like $14 billion. 14 billion, and they're trading at like a 200 million-ish plus now, which is like, you just look at the chart. Again, I don't know when we're recording this, when this is going out, but like those are, the trend line of it.
Yeah.
And
It's not going back to 14 billion.
Yeah,
by the time this is released.
Or something has to happen,
Totally.
Yes, by the time it released, that'd be the greatest turnaround of all time. But yeah, it's just one of those ones. It's like, but you look at a lot of stuff. If you raise money in 2020, 2021, and where those companies are at now, a lot of them are in trouble because they've raised too much money to just shut the business down, and they have huge expectations, and the story that they sold doesn't really exist.
Yeah, the most honest thing they could do is go back to investors and be like, hey, look, we raised money when money was incredibly cheap. We had a vision. The vision has, or the market has moved away from us.
Yeah.
We need to go in another direction.
Yeah.
Impossible would be better off like just cutting the line and starting literally on any, like they'd be better off cutting the line and buying your business probably.
Well, I think that's what they're trying to take it. They want to
hostile takeover.
Yeah, they want to say that their trademarks overlap our trade, and we're like, we do different things. But
yeah.
But
it's so interesting. The CPG.
Yeah, but I'm more bullish on my business than yeah. I'm like much more excited about it, especially once you get this, the lawsuit behind you.
Yeah, these guys stop knocking on your door.
Just leave me alone.
But the CPG space is so interesting because, I think in the last, like from 2010 to 2020, the technology that has come on the scene in that time period to launch a CPG brand in the e-com space is incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about during COVID, the ability to access people who are just spending a disproportionate amount of their time online because they're locked up at home. The amount of brands that launched during COVID who have just ripped and crushed because people were just looking at their phone way more than they usually were. And yeah, I think like our spending habits are now being steered online, and capital was very cheap during that time period, 2010, 2020. And all these new technologies like, Shopify and all the plugins and all this, like it's gotten way easier to spin up a CPG brand where it's like the expectation should be like you need distribution and you need to be disciplined in order to like build those brands up. Just throwing money at it is not going to work.
Yeah, and it's like you have to have you need to nail the product.
Yeah.
You really need to nail the product and be differentiated enough with that and the brand to make people, because it's not just the first buy, it's the second buy, it's the third buy, right? And that's been really interesting just to see kind of people differentiate themselves, because there's like Element was one of the first people out there with like the electrolyte powders, and then the electrolyte market is a lot of new players coming in the space, but there's a bunch of them. I don't know a lot of like second or third place guys in the space, there's enough.
So crowded.
Yeah, there's enough for other people to make money, but it's like it's hard to see where they've differentiated themselves in a way that like Element was kind of first to market on the salty side of things. So
totally.
But yeah, it's really interesting to see. I was thinking about, I first started selling like T-shirts in like 2010, 2011. There was like I think I just had to take like old PayPal orders, and then like I had to forward it to the apparel maker. It's just like the whole tech stack is like, it's so much easier even since COVID, right? Like Shopify has gotten so much better. It's easier to start than ever. You just have to, it's not the starting that differentiates people anymore. It's like the discipline, like you said, it's the product, and it's the ability to keep going when you get knocked around.
Yeah. What, for you, do you feel like this whole season of your life, like, can you kind of like project like into the future when you're in the weeds defending yourself so much? Like,
what do you mean? What do you mean about there's a
just kind of just like, launching the brand Impossible, like you have a vision for what you're building, but as you like are kind of like under attack through this lawsuit, have you been able to like maintain that visionary mindset for what you're building?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, like part of me wants to be like, oh, this shouldn't happen. This is like crazy. This is crazy. Like it's funny when people are like,
Give me a 0 to 10. How like crazy this?
I mean, it's kind of 10. It's kind of 10 out of 10. I don't know. I mean, it's one thing if you have a company that raises like a bill. I gotta be careful here, but it's one thing if a company raises like $2 billion,
Yeah.
and they hire a branding company and they use a logo that if you overlay the two logos, the original logo is like very close.
Yeah.
And then they start promoting something that, I don't think I would normally promote whatever they're promoting, which is okay. Then you try to talk to them and they sue you. And then you try to talk to them again and they sue you personally. And we think we're going to, I think we have a great case. So there's part of me that could just be like, oh, this is totally unfair. This is insane. It's crazy. And when people hear about the case, they're always like, oh, that doesn't sound real. Da, da, da. I'm like, I would love to tell you that I made it up. But
has it been hard? Like, has it been hard for you just from a emotional standpoint? Like, do you feel like people relate to like at all to like what you're going through on like a human level?
I don't know if you haven't been through a lawsuit before. I don't know if you can know what it's like.
Just the level of stress you're kind of just carrying on a day-to-day basis, or
yeah, and it's also like when they escalated and they sued me personally, it's not like if you're suing a company, it's one thing. They're trying to make it personal.
Yeah, because when I hear you say that, I'm like, if I got a lawsuit from some company, my stress would go through my eyeballs when I first read that and saw it.
Well, I think I'm pretty good at stress tolerance. One thing, so I had a lawsuit before one time, and it was kind of this weird thing. I was a little unsophisticated with like dealing with lawyers at that point, and I was very much of the mindset like, oh, we're just in the right, so we don't have to do that much. And so I just like we messed up a few things in that lawsuit, and then eventually I got on the phone with the owner of the other company, and I think we hashed out a deal in like an hour.
Really?
Yeah.
Just kind of, hey,
well, it was
let's
like
figure this out.
It was I think I could talk about that. It was Jonathan Kuhn. I don't know if you know who Jonathan Kuhn is. Jonathan was he did 1-800 contacts. He funded Napoleon Dynamite.
No way.
Like yeah, and then he's running a whole bunch of stuff now at over on Lake Austin, like a bunch of really high end hotel residence stuff. And we had some conflict around my company used to be named the LLC name was Impossible Ventures, and but he was always used to being the underdog against someone else. Like when he was running 1-800 Contacts, he was going up against like Walmart or the federal government or something like that. So he's like, oh, I just send lawsuits to people and that's how I resolve things.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, you could have just talked to me. And so we got on the phone call. I was like actually pretty cool with Jonathan. I think he's super smart. He's very successful. And we hashed out a deal like pretty quickly. But I don't remember where I was going with that. But if you haven't been through a lawsuit or you haven't had like some semblances of it, I think most entrepreneurs at some point, you get something.
Yeah.
And there's just different levels of stress. And so there's a lot of like bogus lawsuits that people get hit with, or like it's like a 5 to 15K settlement type thing. They're annoying, but they're not like existential.
Yeah, right.
And then there's like partnership disputes. Those are really tough. I know a lot of people that have had those. And then there's like these big ones where you're like, this seems like a bad joke.
Yeah, is this real?
Yeah. So,
well, maybe they'll make like a documentary out of it, and you'll end up out on top.
Yeah, maybe we'll use clips of this interview.
Yeah.
It's one of those ones. It's like if you zoom out from everything, and you're like, okay, in a year, this thing's over, and let's say you fast forward and you win. What do you want to have done next year, right? But also fast forward, and if you lose, like how do you want to like play the game in order that like you can be around next year and still be like, It's a jury trial. Jury trials are always a little bit unpredictable. So there's no guarantee in anything, right? I think we have a great case. I'm not super concerned, but
Do you get to like get into like dietary preferences of the jury? Like,
I don't know.
I mean,
I actually don't. I've never. So this is funny because it's like at this point, I've been through a whole like a couple different lawsuits at this point to different extents, and we're getting to the point where I've been about as far as I've been before in a lawsuit. So I haven't done jury selection ever before. So I don't know how that works.
Right.
But up to like summary judgment, I have like a pretty good understanding of how everything goes.
all right.
So that's an interesting question. It's in San Francisco, so we'll see how it goes. But I think the story tells itself. I think the facts, are pretty obvious. But it is one of those ones. Just like, regardless of what happens, right? Regardless of what happens, like, what do you need to do to feel good about yourself? And the way I felt about Impossible is like, listen, man, I'm not gonna pull any punches. Like if you go through this thing and you go to trial and all this other stuff happens, and at trial a whole jury decides that yes, $1 billion company that was founded 6 years after you can sue you, and if that's how this thing settles out, and that's how the end of Impossible happens, okay, okay. But I'm not gonna end Impossible because I'm just like, oh, that was hard, I quit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give it everything I got. So
I love it.
We're gonna keep pushing.
What have you been doing to kind of manage through some of the just personal? Is there anything that you've kind of done just on a day-to-day basis just to be like, all right, like this is a crazy situation, but I'm going to continue to just like invest it in myself and make sure that I'm like still taking care of myself?
Just like stress-wise, yeah.
Yeah, just kind of like going through a crazy season of life. Like what's kind of anchored you?
Yeah.
Obviously, you have that vision of like whatever the outcome is, like you're not gonna, you're willing to like pull back and just be like, whatever happens here happens. But
well, you got to live with yourself, right? Like that's imagine like living with yourself and not like respecting yourself. That would be way worse than whatever outcome.
Dude.
Yeah,
tons of respect for you for like putting up to like a fight up until this point.
Yeah. I would say, I'm at the gym all the time. I have to be. It's just like if your body's not like under, I'm very much like I need to put my body under stress, and if I can put it under stress, then I'm not carrying that throughout the day.
Yeah.
Finding something every day to like move forward, even if it's small, and then also just not getting stuck on the computer all the time, because it's really easy to be like, oh, I should be here because there's stuff to do. But there's not always stuff to do. Some of you just like, you're just refreshing Gmail, waiting for an answer, and you're like, I could go outside, I could go in the water, I go see friends, and that's the other, just like getting around friends, be like, I don't have to like. There's sometimes an urge to be like overly productive on stuff, and it's like sometimes just be like, being not productive is actually really productive on like rejuvenating your brain and letting yourself like get back to normal so you can start creating again.
Dude, I love that. Yeah, creating from a place of rest is a totally different experience than like just creating from that like frenetic energy of like, oh, I just got to do stuff, Yeah, some of your best ideas probably come from extended periods of like nothing.
I'm really good about brute forcing stuff. Like I can brute force like a lot of things.
Yeah.
But the creativity angle, especially with like, I've been making a lot more content lately. I've been producing a bunch more stuff, getting kind of back to my roots. And it's been really interesting that, one, I'm getting faster at it so I can produce more content faster. But then I'm also getting better about I'm producing more, but I'm consuming less. And so I'm having more time off, and then that generates more ideas.
Right.
So I think that's been a great move.
How has comedy kind of helped you through some of this?
Comedy's interesting.
Because you do, for listeners, you do stand-up comedy here in Austin.
Yeah.
This renaissance of comedy coming to Austin, Texas, which is so funny that like this middle of nowhere place in Texas
Yeah,
is like
yeah.
the center of comedy now in the U.S.
Well, I started just before COVID. I basically did a couple keynotes. I was doing some keynotes for Impossible, a bunch of like um, annual sales meetings and stuff like that, motivational speeches around like racing and Impossible and endurance stuff. And I did a like a B-level joke to one of these audiences, and they'd been like looking at spreadsheets all day and listening to like, you know, the CFO talk. And I did like a B-level joke, and it crushed. And I was like, "Oh, I'm amazing." But I was also pissed because I was like, that was cheating. Like,
Yeah.
you didn't deserve all that laughter. So I got started right before COVID. I was like, you have to go up and do stand-up because you've been talking about it. Did it a couple times, and then COVID happened, whatever. And then after COVID, you basically have this whole new wave in Austin. It's like a completely different scene. And it's been interesting because it's like I haven't done a lot of comedy about the lawsuit yet. It's a weird thing to bring up.
Your material is about to take a strong right turn.
Litigation, am I right? It's not a super relatable piece of material where you're just like, getting sued by $1 billion company, and people like you're drunk at 1 a.m. on a Wednesday, and you're like, I
can't relate.
Yeah, I can't relate.
You are an animal.
Yeah. But it is fun. Just like the fun thing about comedy is that like just walking around, like I do find like the absurdities and more stuff. And I think in a past life, like I would just get like mad about stuff. And now I just think it's funny.
Yeah.
So it is fun to be like, in some ways, it's kind of a stress release valve where you're like, in a world where everything is really stressful and everything can be really stressful, you don't have to be super stressed about this. You can just relax a little bit.
Right.
And it can be ridiculous, and you can be mad for like 2 seconds, but then you can just like, okay, well, this is a bit now. No, I got now this is work.
Yeah.
So,
thanks to the material.
Yeah, exactly. So, I've had a really good time with it. It is like a pacing thing where I think I was doing a lot more comedy before the lawsuit, and so the lawsuit takes up so much time, whatever. But it is a good, it's a nice life thing to have in there that kind of keeps you sane.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I know a lot of people have gone down that rabbit hole of just even trying stand up and getting up there, and the fact that I feel like maybe credit to Joe Rogan for popularizing like certain aspects of stand up comedy, or at least like the willingness to like want to go like try it.
Yeah.
But I do feel like it's like one of those things that like I can't imagine how much that develops you as a person. Just getting up there for the first time on stage and having to be like, all right, I have to accept the fact that this is probably going to go terribly, and just go up there and work on this material.
Well, Rogan's got that bit. It's not a bit. He's just a phrase about like jujitsu. It's like high level problem solving with like dire consequences. He says something like that. Yeah. I think stand up is just public speaking on hard mode, because it's podcasting is fun. But podcasting, you get some distance. If someone hates you, they're in a YouTube comment.
Dude, this is beginner mode for public speaking.
Yeah, like, 6 states away. So like, this is intimidating, but you're like, haters aren't going to like bust in.
Yeah.
They're not sitting over there with a, a drink thrown at you.
Yeah.
Stand up is like public speaking on hard mode where you're like, I have to convince you might not even know a comedy show's happening if you're at an open mic. Like you could just be like, I'm at a bar and this guy's talking to me.
Yeah.
So you have to convince them to listen to you, convince them that like your frame of the world is correct, and then that it's funny. And it's in like less than stellar environment, like 11 or 1 in the morning. And if you can do that, like when you do that and you get laughs, it's awesome. And when it doesn't go well, you're like, okay.
Do you have a performance in mind that was like better than expected? Like you just hit it out of the park and you're like, oh, for whatever reason, things just worked that night?
I run a quarterly show at a boot shop in town. And those shows are always really fun because it's like, I produce the show and the room is like a 40-person room, or it's like 35-person room. And we put 40 people in it. So it's packed out, and then all the comics do 15, and it just, everybody kills. And
does 15's like, is that just like a good time block for people, or is that?
Yeah, if you're like a good comic, you probably 15's like a good range. It's a nice showcase range. If you're doing like more of a headliner, they're probably doing like 45 to an hour.
Yeah.
But when I do those shows, I do them as showcases. So you have 4 to 6 comics on a lineup. And what's nice about that is that audiences have different preferences on just styles of comedy. So all the comics I book, I think, are hilarious. But some are really high energy, some are low energy, some are a little more self-deprecating, some more like, bizarre, whatever it is. But if you do, usually I'll do like 4 comics at 15, 1 comic at 10, and maybe 1 comic at 7 or something like that. You get a whole bunch of types of comedy through, and everybody has like a different comic that they'll like. And they're like, oh, I like this guy, I like that guy, I like this guy. So, but those are my favorite shows to produce because they're like kind of like secret show old Austin style.
That's cool.
Where it's like you have to know someone to get an invite. We lose money on those shows, but the comics have a great time. The audiences have a great time, and people are always like, when's the next one?
Yeah, please do more.
One? And that's hard in Austin right now because comedy's gotten so big that a ton of Mothership sold out all the time. But there's tons of other shows around town. Some are free, some are 20. There's a bunch of $20 shows, and it's hard to know sometimes which $20 shows are really good and which ones are not. Sometimes, there's a bunch of mics, and so people will be like, oh, I saw comedy, but they saw like an open mic. They didn't see like a show. So it's an interesting dynamic to like make a show that people are asking you, when's the next one that I can come back to? Like, that's really fun challenge to make.
That's cool. Yeah, my buddy over here on the east side, he's done something similar with music venues. It's just like one of these like pop-up music events.
Yeah.
Just in his backyard. And like more than 100 people came to the one that I went to. I'm like, dude, your place is packed. People love this.
Yeah.
But it's not really like, it's not something you're necessarily able to replicate on a regular basis. So it's, for him, it's just a great thing. And he's not making any money off it, but it's like an amazing time. So you're like, this is awesome.
That's, when did you move to Austin?
2021.
Yeah, so Austin used to have a little bit more of this. So when we talk about like old Austin used to have like these like random pop-up things where it actually doesn't make any financial sense. And it doesn't like, like
we used to kind of do some of this stuff. Like we would just host parties and be like, we're going to take the L on cooking a bunch of meat.
Yeah.
But, have fun.
Yeah. That stuff is like, that's where I think Austin really shines is like, it's a big enough city. There's a lot of people, but it's small enough that you know a lot of people.
Yeah.
And when you can create these like community events that if you do it, if we did this show, we could maybe do the show that I was talking about every month. But if we did it like every week, it wouldn't be special.
Yeah, it's kind of like overkill.
But quarterly, people are like, they get enough distance from it, and then they're like, I should go see some comedy again. When's that happening? So that's the best one that I've done. And, there's a lot of other good clubs in town too, but that's really fun.
I love it. Dude, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. Where can people find you, learn more about what you got going on at Impossible?
Yeah, so you can find all of my stuff at Joel Runyon on X or Twitter, whatever we're calling it these days.
Yeah.
Websites are impossiblehq.com is kind of like the hub for everything. You can find all of our stuff at the store at impossible.co. And then we have a bunch of nonprofit stuff that we do. I mentioned them shortly with some entrepreneurs around the world, and then also education and schools, and that's all at impossible.org. So if you guys want to check that out, I'm posting every day right now.
Nice.
About
on X?
On X, on pretty much every platform.
Sweet.
About the lawsuit. So there's a lot of really interesting background stories. I share a lot of my perspectives, but then also like some of the mechanics of the lawsuit too. So I'm sharing that every single day. So there's a lot of stuff coming out on X right now. So check that out.
Love it. Dude, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.